Oh, those are for the couples, sweetie. Happy Valentine's Day, though. The clink of glasses stopped mid-toast as every passenger in the first 3 rows turned to look. Vivian didn't reach for the bottle or demand to be served. She just set her book in her lap and looked at the flight attendant with the kind of patience that only comes from a lifetime of being underestimated. The attendant, a blonde woman in her early 30s whose name tag read Kristen, was already moving to the next row, handing flutes to a white couple with matching sweaters and the self-satisfied glow of a staged Instagram post. What Kristen didn't know was that seat 4A wasn't occupied by a woman who couldn't find a Valentine. It was occupied by a woman who'd lost one, and who was flying to keep a promise that mattered more than any holiday. Vivian had upgraded to first class using miles. Not her miles, Raymond's. Her late husband had been a road warrior for 31 years, a logistics manager for a medical supply company who spent more time in airports than most people spent in their offices. He'd accumulated nearly 400,000 frequent flyer miles by the time he was diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, the kind that doesn't negotiate. He died 14 months ago, 2 days before Thanksgiving, in their bedroom in Nashville, with Vivian holding his hand and Ella Fitzgerald playing on the old record player he refused to replace. He was 63. They'd been married for 34 years. And every single one of those years, Raymond had promised Vivian the same thing. One day, baby, I'm taking you to Savannah for Valentine's Day. The real Savannah. River Street, pralines, the whole thing, just you and me. But there was always a work trip, a deadline, a kid's school event, a reason to postpone. And then there was cancer. And then there was nothing. Except the miles. So Vivian had booked the flight herself. Nashville to Savannah, first class, because Raymond had always said, when I finally take you, we're doing it right. February 14th. Valentine's Day. She wasn't going with him. But she was going for him. And she was going to do it right. The champagne incident was the first thing. But it wasn't the last. 20 minutes into the flight, Kristen returned with the drink cart. Can I get you anything? She asked the couple across the aisle, white 60s holding hands. 2 glasses of white wine, please, the man said. How sweet, celebrating Valentine's Day. 42 years, the woman beamed. That's wonderful, happy anniversary. Then Kristen turned to Vivian. And for you. Her tone had shifted, subtly. The warmth she'd shown the couple had cooled to professional courtesy. I'll have a glass of champagne, please. We're out of the complimentary champagne. I can offer you a glass for $12. Vivian looked at the bottle still sitting on the cart, still half full, still being poured for other passengers. That bottle right there. That's reserved for the Valentine's promotion, which I'm not eligible for because. Kristen hesitated. It's for couples. Where does it say that? It's our Valentine's Day special for couples traveling together. I'm traveling on Valentine's Day. I'm on this flight, and I'd like a glass of champagne. Kristen's smile tightened. I'll check with my supervisor. She walked away. The woman from the couple across the aisle leaned over. That was odd. She poured it for us without asking if we were a couple. Vivian smiled tiredly. She assumed. Assumed what? That you were together, and that I wasn't worth the trouble. The woman looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't do anything wrong. Kristen returned 2 minutes later with a glass of champagne. Compliments of the airline, she said, setting it down without meeting Vivian's eyes. Happy Valentine's Day. She moved on before Vivian could respond. Vivian took the glass and sipped it slowly. It tasted like being tolerated. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The seat beside Vivian, 4B, had been empty during boarding. Just before the door closed, a man slid in. Late 40s, white, wedding ring, the harried look of someone who'd run to make the flight. "Made it," he said, stuffing his bag under the seat. "Sorry." "No need to apologize." He buckled in, caught his breath, then turned to Vivian. "Flying alone on Valentine's Day too, huh?" "I am." "Me too, work trip, wife's not happy about it," he laughed. "You." Vivian could have told him everything. Could have explained about Raymond, the miles, the promise, the pilgrimage to Savannah. But she didn't owe him her story. "Personal trip," she said simply. "Gotcha." He glanced at her left hand where her wedding ring still sat. "Husband couldn't make it." "No, he couldn't." "Work." "Something like that." He nodded sympathetically. "My wife and I had a rule, never travel apart on Valentine's Day, but this year my boss didn't care about rules." He laughed again. Vivian smiled politely and returned to her book. But the man, whose name was Todd, she'd later learn, wasn't done. "What are you reading?" She showed him the cover, the collected poems of Lucille Clifton. "Poetry, huh? I'm more of a thriller guy, but my wife reads poetry. She says it keeps her sane." "It does. She'd like you. She's always saying there aren't enough women who appreciate the arts." "Your wife sounds lovely." "She is, 22 years. High school sweethearts, still crazy about each other." Vivian nodded, feeling the familiar ache. Todd looked at her again, more carefully this time. "You know, it's not so bad flying alone on Valentine's Day. Gives you time to think." "I have plenty of time to think." "You should treat yourself, though. Get something nice at the airport. Flowers or chocolates. Self-love, right? That's what my wife would say." He meant well, Vivian could see that. But self-love wasn't what this trip was about. It was about a love that had lasted 34 years and didn't end just because one person left the room. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. Then she put in her earbuds and closed her eyes. This is where things shifted. With her eyes closed and Ella Fitzgerald playing in her ears, Vivian listened to the cabin around her. She could hear Kristen making the rounds. "More champagne. Happy Valentine's Day. Are you two celebrating anything special today? What a beautiful couple. How long have you been together?" Every interaction was warm, engaged, personal. Every interaction was with couples. When Kristen reached Vivian's row, the warmth disappeared. "Can I clear your glass?" No question about her plans, no interest in her day, no warmth. Vivian opened her eyes, sure. Kristen took the glass and moved on. Todd noticed, "She's not very friendly to you." "She's fine." "She's not, though. She's treating everyone else like it's prom night and you like you're here by accident." Vivian looked at him, surprised by his directness. "I've been watching," he said. "She skipped you 3 times on the drink cart. She brought the couple in row 3 dessert and didn't offer you any, and she keeps looking at you with this expression." "What expression?" "Like she feels sorry for you." Vivian's jaw tightened slightly. "Pity." That's what she'd been feeling from Kristen all flight. Not hostility, not overt rudeness. Just pity. The assumption that a black woman sitting alone in first class on Valentine's Day was something sad, something to be managed with minimal effort and maximum avoidance. "I'm not someone to feel sorry for," Vivian said quietly. "I can see that," Todd said. "I just wish she could too." An hour into the flight, another flight attendant appeared, older brunette, with the practiced cheer of someone who'd been doing this for 20 years. Her name tag read Diane. "Hi there, I'm Diane, your lead attendant. Happy Valentine's Day. How are we doing in row 4? She looked at Todd, "Traveling for work?" "Unfortunately, yes." "Oh, that's too bad. Well, we have a little Valentine's surprise for our passengers, chocolate truffles and a card." She handed Todd a small box and a red envelope. Then she turned to Vivian and hesitated. Is there someone meeting you in Savannah? No. Oh, Diane's face fell into that expression Vivian had come to recognize, the careful, condescending sympathy of someone who's decided you're pathetic. Well, Valentine's Day is for everyone, right? Self-love is important too. She handed Vivian a box of truffles and a card. Vivian opened the card. It read, "To our special couples, thank you for flying with us on the most romantic day of the year." Vivian set it down. "This card is for couples," she said. "Oh, we give them to everyone." It literally says, "To our special couples." Diane looked at the card, then back at Vivian. "Well, the sentiment is universal." "No, it's not. This card was designed for couples. You gave it to me because you had nothing else to offer a woman traveling alone." Diane's cheeks flushed. "I didn't mean to." "I'm sure you didn't, but the result is the same. I've been treated as an afterthought on this flight since I sat down." Todd spoke up. "She's right. The other attendant, Kristen, has been skipping her on service rounds and treating her completely differently from the couples." "I'm sure that wasn't intentional." "Intent doesn't change impact," Vivian said. "Whether it's intentional or not, I've received less service, less warmth, and less attention than every other passenger in first class. And I think we all know why." The cabin went quiet. Not dramatically, just the way a space goes quiet when someone says something true and uncomfortable. Diane looked around, clearly aware that other passengers were listening. "MS, I'm sorry, what's your name?" "Vivian Cole." "Ms. Cole, I sincerely apologize if you felt overlooked. That was never our intention." "Then what was your intention? When you saw a black woman sitting alone in first class on Valentine's Day, what did you think?" Diane's mouth opened and closed. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was written in every interaction, every skipped champagne pour, every sympathetic glance, every moment of carefully calibrated pity that assumed Vivian's aloneness was a deficit rather than a choice. "I'd like to speak with the head of your cabin crew," Vivian said. "I am the head of the cabin crew." "Then I'd like this conversation documented, and I'd like a formal complaint process initiated before we land." Diane nodded slowly. "Of course, I'll get you the forms." She walked away. Todd looked at Vivian with something like admiration. That was impressive. That was exhausting. What she didn't realize yet was that the couple across the aisle had been recording on their phone since Diane first handed her the card. 30 minutes before landing, the plane hit unexpected turbulence. The seatbelt sign came on, passengers grabbed armrests, the overhead bins rattled. But it wasn't the air that was unsettled, it was the cabin. Word had traveled through first class about Vivian's exchange with Diane. People were whispering. Vivian could feel the attention, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some hostile. A white woman 2 rows ahead turned around and said, loudly enough to be heard, "Some people just want to make everything about race." Todd stiffened. "Excuse me. I'm just saying, not everything is discrimination. Sometimes a flight attendant is just busy." "She wasn't busy," Todd said. "She was pouring champagne for everyone else and skipping this woman. Maybe she didn't see her. She didn't see her because she didn't want to." The woman turned back around, muttering. The older couple across the aisle, the ones who'd been married 42 years, leaned toward Vivian. "We saw everything," the wife said, "and we agree with you, the service was different for you. Thank you for saying that. We'd like to be included in your complaint if that's possible, as witnesses." "That means a lot." The husband pulled out a business card. "My name is Richard Porter. I'm retired now, but I was in aviation management for 30 years. What happened to you today wasn't just poor service, It was a training failure. Vivian took the card. I appreciate your perspective. And for what it's worth, Richard said, my wife and I have been flying first class for decades. We've never once been asked if we could afford our seats or if our champagne was for couples only. The assumption was always that we belonged. You deserved that same assumption. Vivian's throat tightened. The assumption of belonging. That's what had been missing all flight. Not champagne, not truffles, not a Valentine's card. Just the basic assumption that she had every right to be where she was. This is where the tone changed. Diane returned with a complaint form, standard airline issue, 1 page, barely room for details. Vivian looked at it. This form has 3 lines for description. You can attach additional pages if needed. I'll be writing my own statement. This form is insufficient. Diane looked like she wanted to argue but thought better of it. That's your right. I'd also like your full name and employee number, and Kristen's. I can give you mine. Kristen's you'd need to request through customer service. Then I'll request it. Vivian pulled out her tablet and began typing. She wrote quickly, precisely, the way she'd written in her career as a middle school assistant principal, documenting behavior, noting patterns, building a case with facts rather than feelings. Incident report, Flight 847, Nashville to Savannah. Date, February 14. Passenger, Vivian Cole, seat 4A, first class. Summary, throughout this flight, I received markedly different service from cabin crew compared to other first-class passengers. I was initially denied complimentary champagne that was offered to all surrounding passengers. I was skipped on multiple drink service rounds. I was not offered dessert service. I was given a Valentine's Day card addressed to couples, with no acknowledgement that the gesture was inappropriate for a solo traveler. When I raised these concerns with lead attendant Diane Morris, she offered a generic apology but no explanation for the disparity in service. I believe the differential treatment was based on assumptions about my race, my marital status, and my perceived right to occupy first class as a solo black woman on Valentine's Day. Witnesses willing to corroborate. Richard Porter, seat 3D, retired aviation management. Sandra Porter, seat 3C. Todd Brennan, seat 4B. She saved the document and emailed it to herself. Then she opened the airline's app and submitted a formal complaint through their digital system, attaching her written statement. She was thorough because she'd learned to be. Because in her career, she'd seen too many incidents dismissed for lack of documentation. Because she knew that feelings didn't move institutions, evidence did. The next decision would change how this ended. The plane touched down in Savannah at 2:17 p.m. Valentine's Day was bright and crisp, 54 degrees, blue sky, the kind of southern winter afternoon that made you grateful to be alive. As passengers deplaned, Vivian gathered her things carefully. Raymond's ashes were in her carry-on, a small, elegant urn in a velvet pouch, nestled between her clothes like something precious. Because it was. Todd stood to let her out of the row. "Hey," he said, "I hope you have a good time in Savannah." "Thank you. And I meant what I said earlier. You handled that really well." "I've had practice. My wife would want me to say this, so I'm going to. Whatever you're here for, I hope it brings you peace." Vivian felt her eyes sting. "Thank you, Todd." As she walked up the jetway, Diane was standing at the aircraft door. "Ms. Cole, I want you to know that your complaint has been logged and will be reviewed by our customer service team." "I appreciate that. And I truly am sorry if that your experience wasn't what it should have been." Vivian looked at her. "That's closer, but should have been means you know the standard, which means you chose not to apply it." Diane had nothing to say to that. Vivian walked into the terminal. "Savannah." She was here. Raymond would have loved this. Vivian checked into a bed and breakfast on East Jones Street, a place she'd found online, owned by a black couple who'd restored a historic home with their own hands. The owner, a woman named Grace, greeted her at the door. "Ms. Cole, welcome. Happy Valentine's Day." "Thank you. Are you here for anything special?" Vivian paused. "I'm here for my husband." Grace's expression shifted, not pity but understanding. "Is he meeting you later?" "No, he passed away 14 months ago, but he always promised to bring me here for Valentine's Day, so I came." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard all week. Come in, I've put you in the best room." The room was lovely. High ceilings, antique furniture, a window overlooking a garden of camellias. Vivian set the urn on the dresser, next to a photo of Raymond she'd brought. "We're here, baby," she whispered. "We finally made it." She changed clothes, put on comfortable shoes, and went walking. River Street, the cobblestones, the old cotton warehouses converted into shops and restaurants, the river moving slow and steady, the way Raymond had described it from pictures he'd seen. She bought pralines from a shop on the waterfront, ate one standing at the railing, watching the ferries. She found a bench overlooking the water and sat. Pulled out the book of Russell Clifton poems. Read one aloud softly, to herself and to Drummond. "Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself?" She read it twice. Then she closed the book and watched the river. This was why she'd come. Not for champagne, not for cards, not for validation from strangers who couldn't see past their own assumptions. For this, for the feeling of honoring a promise, for the knowledge that love didn't require another person's presence to be real, for the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Alone, yes, but not lonely. Never lonely. 3 days after she returned to Nashville, Valentine received an email from the airline. "Dear Ms. Cole, thank you for your complaint regarding Flight 847 on February 14th. We have reviewed the incident and want to sincerely apologize for your experience. After interviewing the crew members involved and reviewing witness statements, we have determined that the service you received fell significantly below our standards. The disparity in treatment was unacceptable. We are taking the following actions. 1. Both crew members involved will receive additional training on inclusive service and implicit bias. 2. Our Valentine's Day promotion materials are being revised to be inclusive of all passengers, not just couples. 3. We are implementing a service audit protocol to ensure equitable treatment across all passenger demographics. We would also like to offer you a full refund of your ticket, 50,000 bonus miles, and a $500 travel voucher. Again, we sincerely apologize. Your experience matters to us. Sincerely, Karen Mitchell, Director of Customer Relations." Valentine read it carefully. It was better than she'd expected. But it wasn't enough. She wrote back, "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for your response. I appreciate the actions being taken. However, I want to be clear about something. The issue wasn't just about champagne or a card. It was about the assumption that a black woman traveling alone on Valentine's Day is someone to be puttied, managed, or overlooked. Your crew didn't see me as a passenger entitled to equal service. They saw a sad, single woman who didn't fit the narrative of your holiday promotion, and they adjusted their behavior accordingly, not with malice, but with the kind of unconscious bias that feels like compassion but functions as exclusion. I'm not interested in your miles or your voucher. I'm interested in knowing that the next woman who flies alone on your airline, on Valentine's Day or any other day, will be treated with the same warmth, attention, and respect as every couple on that plane. If your training addresses that, then we're making progress. If it doesn't, then we're just exchanging apologies for silence. I trust you'll choose the former. Sincerely, Vivian Cole. She hit send. Then she went back to her life. What happened next wasn't loud, but it was decisive. What Vivian didn't know was that the couple across the aisle, Richard and Sandra Porter, had posted their recording online. Not the full interaction, just 2 minutes, Cruston skipping Vivian with the champagne and Diane handing her the couple's card. Richard had captioned it, "This woman was treated like a second-class passenger because she flew alone on Valentine's Day. The airline assumed she didn't matter. They were wrong." It had 1.2 million views. Vivian's phone started buzzing. Messages from friends, messages from strangers, messages from journalists. She ignored most of them. But one caught her attention. It was from a woman named Dunus Washington, a producer at a morning news show in Atlanta. "Ms. Cole, I saw the video of what happened on your flight. I'd love to talk to you about your experience, not to sensationalize it, but to have an honest conversation about how single travelers, especially black women, are treated differently in spaces that cater to couples. Would you be interested?" Vivian thought about it for 2 days. Then she said yes. Not for attention. Because the conversation mattered. The interview aired on a Tuesday morning. Vivian sat in the studio, dressed simply, speaking calmly. Dunus asked the obvious questions first. "Tell us what happened on that flight." Vivian did, factually, without embellishment. "Why do you think you were treated differently?" "Because I was a black woman sitting alone in first class on a day that's marketed exclusively for couples. I didn't fit the image they were selling, so I was excluded from the experience. Some people might say you're overreacting, that the flight attendant was just busy or made an honest mistake. She made 12 trips past my seat. She poured champagne for 7 other passengers. She skipped me every time until I asked directly. That's not busy, that's selective." Dunus paused. "Why were you flying to Savannah on Valentine's Day?" Vivian took a breath. "My husband Raman died 14 months ago. We were married for 34 years. Every year he promised to take me to Savannah for Valentine's Day. We never went. There was always a reason to postpone." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "After he died, I found all those miles he'd accumulated from business travel, hundreds of thousands of miles, and I thought, this is how he takes me, even now." The studio went very quiet. "So I booked the flight, used his miles, upgraded to first class because that's how he would have done it, and I went to Savannah by myself, to keep his promise for him." Dunus's eyes were glistening, and instead of being treated with dignity, you were treated as an afterthought. As an afterthought, yes, because they looked at me and saw a woman alone, a black woman alone, and they assumed that meant I was lesser, less deserving of service, less worthy of celebration, less entitled to be in that seat. "What do you want people to take from this?" Vivian looked directly into the camera. "I want them to understand that being alone doesn't mean being empty. That flying solo on Valentine's Day doesn't mean you don't know what love is. That a black woman in first class is not an anomaly to be managed. She's a passenger who paid for a seat and deserves the same service as everyone else. And I want the airline industry to stop designing experiences that exclude single travelers, because we exist, we fly, we have stories just as beautiful as any couples." She paused. "I was carrying my husband's ashes in my bag. I was reading his favorite poet. I was keeping a promise he made me 34 years ago, and the flight attendant didn't think I was worth a glass of champagne. That's what assumptions cost. Not money, not miles, dignity. The interview was viewed 3 million times in 3 days. The response was overwhelming. Solo travelers, women especially, flooded social media with their own stories. I fly alone every Thanksgiving because my family is gone. The looks I get from crew members make me feel like a ghost. I booked a honeymoon suite for myself after my divorce. The hotel called to confirm my reservation 3 times because they assumed it was a mistake. I'm a widow. I travel alone because my husband loved exploring. Every trip is an act of love, but the world treats me like I'm incomplete. The hashtag I fly alone trended for 4 days. Single travelers, widows, divorced women, women who chose not to marry. They all shared their experiences of being treated as afterthoughts, anomalies, or objects of pity in spaces designed exclusively for couples. Travel bloggers published pieces about couple-centric marketing and its exclusionary effects. A sociologist at UMCRI wrote a widely shared essay about how singleness, particularly Black women's singleness, was treated as a social failure rather than a legitimate choice or circumstance. And 3 major airlines quietly revised their Valentine's Day promotion materials. No announcements, no press releases. They just stopped printing cards that said, "To our special couples." Small, but not nothing. 2 months after the flight, Valentine received a letter. Dear Ms. Cole, my name is Krusta Novak. I was the flight attendant on your February 14th flight who failed to serve you champagne. I've been thinking about that flight every day since. Not because I got in trouble, though I did, and I deserved to, but because I keep replaying the moment I walked past your seat with that bottle. I remember looking at you and thinking, I don't even know what I thought. Something about you being alone, something about Valentine's Day, something that made me decide without even realizing it that the champagne wasn't for you. I can't fully explain why I did that, but I've spent the last 2 months in training sessions and therapy trying to understand it. And the honest, ugly truth is, I saw a Black woman sitting alone and I made assumptions about your life. I assumed you couldn't afford first class. I assumed you were alone because you didn't have anyone. I assumed your Valentine's Day was something sad. I was wrong about all of it. When I heard your interview, about your husband, about the miles, about the promise, I cried in my car for 20 minutes because I had the chance to make your flight beautiful, to pour you a glass of champagne and say, "Happy Valentine's Day" with the same warmth I showed everyone else. And I didn't. I stole a moment from you, a moment that was already sacred, and I'm so deeply sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm changing. I'm learning to see people, not assumptions. I'm learning that every passenger has a story I don't know, and I'm learning that my job isn't to judge who deserves warmth, it's to give it to everyone. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for not letting me get away with it. And thank you for sharing your story because it changed mine. With sincere regret. Kristen. Vivian read it at her kitchen table, Raymond's photo watching from the shelf. She didn't write back. Not because she was angry. Because some letters need to exist without response, need to sit in the space between harm and healing, need to be a beginning that doesn't require her participation to continue. Kristen's growth was Kristen's work. Vivian had her own. 4 months after the flight, the airline contacted Vivian again. Not customer relations this time. The VP of Training and Development. Ms. Cole, we've been developing a new service training module based on your experience. We'd like to know if you'd be willing to review it, perhaps contribute to it. Vivian was skeptical. What kind of contribution? We want to include real passenger stories, anonymized, in our training scenarios. Stories that show our staff how assumptions about passengers' personal lives affect service quality. And you want to use my story? With your permission, yes, and we'd compensate you for your time. I don't want compensation. I want it done right. That's why we're asking for your input. Vivian agreed. She reviewed the training materials over the next week. They were better than she'd expected. Real scenarios, real consequences, real discussions about implicit bias. But she had notes. Your scenarios focus on race and class, she told the VP during a video call. You're missing something. What's that? Aloneness. You don't address how single travelers are treated differently from couples, how the assumption of being partnered is the default in your service model. Can you give me an example? Your Valentine's Day promotion was designed for couples. Your anniversary promotions are for couples. Your honeymoon packages are for couples. Everything about your premium service assumes that passengers come in pairs. And when they don't, they're treated as exceptions, afterthoughts, problems to be managed rather than passengers to be served. How do we fix that? You design your service for individuals, every individual, whether they're traveling with someone or not. You train your staff to see each passenger as a person with a story worth respecting, not as half of a couple or a single seat to fill. The VP was quiet. That's a fundamental shift in how we think about service. Yes, it is. It'll take time. Everything worth changing takes time. 1 year after the original flight, Vivian booked another trip to Savannah. Valentine's Day again, first class again, Raymond's miles again. She boarded and settled into 3A. The flight attendant appeared, young, black with a warm smile. Welcome aboard. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you. Can I get you something to drink? We have champagne for all our passengers today. All passengers, not couples, all. Vivian smiled. I'd love a glass. The attendant poured it carefully and set it on Vivian's tray with a small card. This one was different from last year. It read, "Thank you for flying with us today. Whatever brings you here, wherever you're going, we're glad you're on board. No couples, no assumptions, just welcome." Vivian looked at the card for a long time. Then she raised her glass. "To you, Raymond," she whispered. "We did it again." Vivian returned to the same bed and breakfast. Grace was there, smiling at the door. "Welcome back, Miss Cole. It's good to be back." Same room. Same room. Vivian set up the urn on the dresser again, the photo of Raymond beside it. She walked to River Street, bought pralines, found the same bench. Read Lucille Clifton, watched the river. And this time she brought something new. A letter she'd written it the night before to Raymond. "My love, it's been 2 years since you left. I still reach for you in the morning. I still hear your laugh when something's funny on TV. I still save you the last praline in the box. I came back to Savannah because you asked me to. Because this was our place, even though we never got here together. Because keeping your promise is the closest I can get to keeping you. Last year, a woman on the plane decided I didn't deserve champagne because I was alone. She looked at me and saw something sad, something incomplete. She was wrong. I'm not incomplete. I'm carrying 34 years of love with me everywhere I go. That's not empty, that's full. Fuller than most people will ever understand. I miss you every day, but I'm living, Raymond. I'm traveling, I'm speaking up. I'm refusing to be small. You'd be proud of me. I'm proud of us. All my love always. Vivian." She folded the letter, tucked it into the velvet pouch beside the urn, and sat on the bench watching the river move. The next decision would quietly change everything. 6 months later, the airline released their annual diversity report. Buried in the training section was a new module, Every passenger has a story, inclusive service beyond assumptions. It included anonymized scenarios drawn from real passenger experiences. One of them was Vivian's. Scenario 4. A solo passenger in first class on Valentine's Day is repeatedly skipped during service rounds while couples receive priority attention. When confronted, the crew realizes they've been applying a couple's first bias to their service without awareness. Discussion questions. What assumptions did the crew make about this passenger? How might those assumptions differ if the passenger were a different race, gender, or age? How can we ensure equal service regardless of a passenger's relationship status? The module was mandatory for all 23,000 customer-facing employees. Vivian never saw it, but she felt its effects. Every time she flew, which was more often now, using Raymond's miles, the service was different, not perfect, not transformed overnight, but different, more aware, more intentional, more equal. And once, on a flight to Chicago, a flight attendant brought her champagne without being asked and said, "You look like someone who deserves to celebrate today." It was a Tuesday, not Valentine's Day, not an anniversary. Just a Tuesday. And it was the best glass of champagne Vivian had ever tasted. 2 years after the original flight, Vivian was invited to speak at a travel industry conference. The topic, the invisible passenger, how airlines fail solo travelers. She stood in front of 300 industry professionals and told them everything. About Raymond, about the miles, about the champagne. About being seen as half a person because she wasn't part of a pair. When I boarded that flight, she said, I was carrying 34 years of love. I was keeping a promise my husband couldn't keep himself. I was doing something brave and beautiful and deeply personal. And the airline saw a woman alone. Not a widow honoring her marriage, not a traveler with a story, not a passenger who'd earned every mile that paid for that seat. Just a woman alone on Valentine's Day. And they assumed that meant I was less. She paused. I'm here to tell you, alone doesn't mean less. Solo doesn't mean sad. Unpartnered doesn't mean unloved. 44% of American adults are single. That's nearly 130 million people. They travel, they fly, they stay in hotels, they eat in restaurants. And too often, they're treated as afterthoughts in an industry designed for couples. Fix that not because it's good PR, because it's right. The applause was long and sincere. After the speech, a woman approached, young, maybe 30, flight attendant uniform visible under her blazer. Ms. Cole, I went through the training module based on your story, and I wanted you to know I was the one who brought you champagne on that Tuesday flight to Chicago. Vivian's eyes widened. That was you. I recognized you from the training materials, even though it was anonymized the details. I just knew, she smiled. And I thought this woman deserves to be celebrated, not because it's Valentine's Day, just because she's here. Vivian hugged her. That meant more than you know. It meant something to me too, because before that training I would have walked right past you, same as Kristen, not because I'm cruel, because I was trained to prioritize couples, to assume that the solo traveler needs less attention, less care, less warmth. Your training changed that. Your story changed that. The training just showed it to me. They assumed the wrong thing about Vivian Cole. They assumed she was alone because she was unloved. They assumed she was in first class by mistake. They assumed Valentine's Day was a reminder of what she didn't have, rather than a celebration of what she'd had for 34 extraordinary years. They assumed she needed pity. She needed champagne. Not because it was expensive or special, because it was offered to everyone else. And being excluded from everyone else was the quiet cruelty she'd lived with her entire life. Not the dramatic kind, Not the kind that makes headlines. The kind that happens in skipped drink carts and sympathetic glances and cards addressed to couples that remind you the world wasn't designed with you in mind. Vivian didn't shout, didn't make a scene, didn't demand special treatment. She asked for equal treatment. And when she didn't receive it, she documented, she reported, she spoke. And her voice, calm, clear, unwavering, changed how an airline served 23,000 flights a day. Not because she was powerful, because she was right, and because she refused to accept that being alone meant being invisible. Raymond would have been proud. He would have said, "That's my girl." He would have poured her champagne himself, the good kind, not the airline kind, and toasted to 34 years and counting. Because love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes shape, becomes a suitcase full of miles, becomes a bench overlooking a river, becomes a glass of champagne on a Tuesday in Chicago, becomes a woman who flies alone on Valentine's Day, not because she has no one, but because she carries someone with her everywhere she goes. She didn't raise her voice. She raised a glass. To love that doesn't need a second seat to be real. To dignity that doesn't need a partner to be earned. To the quiet truth that alone is not the same as empty. And to Raymond. Always to Raymond. They looked at her and saw a woman without a partner, without a reason, without a right to the seat she was sitting in. But Vivian Cole wasn't without anything. She was full of love, full of purpose, full of a promise kept across time and loss. The only thing missing was the world's ability to see it. So she made them see. Not with volume, not with anger. With presence, with patience, with the quiet insistence that she was not an afterthought. She was the whole story. And the whole story deserved champagne.